Welcome back to 2D animation. Picking up where we left off from the introduction to the user interface, we're going to continue on to the tools section in more detail. Now, we're using Adobe Animate CC, part of the Adobe Creative Cloud, and the first thing I want you to do, if you haven't already done this or you're just continuing from, you may already have this done, if you're continuing from earlier, change these numbers to 1280 by 720. I want you to get into a habit of doing that. Now the other thing we're going to do is I'm going to explain what these tools do, and we're going to go ahead and start playing around with some of them. So the top set of tools up here, these are sort of our selection tools. So we have our selection tool, our sub-selection tool, free transform tool. We're not going to go into the 3D rotation or 3D translation tool. And if you notice, there's a little arrow underneath these icons, and if there is a little icon, that means there's a sub-selection tool. So I'm going to go over the main tools that we need to cover today to sort of get us ready to start creating content. Now, this is the lasso tool. This has sub-selections as well, polygon tool, and magic wand. Now, pushing forward to some of these content creation tools, we have our pen tool, text tool, line tool, square or rectangle tool, excuse me, oval tool, polystar tool, pencil tool, paintbrush tool, and brush tool. So I'm going to start with the pen tool. Now the pen tool over here, if I click my pen tool and I start to create some kind of shape, I can run a click, I can run a click, drag, and then you can also run some of these other click drags that give it some of these curvature lines and so on and so forth, like a Bezier almost. And then when I'm ready and I'm pleased and happy with sort of the shape that I've created, if I hover over the starting point, you're going to notice this little circle pop up directly next to the pen tool. You can go ahead and double click on that, and you'll see that it closes the shape and I get this curved tool. Now if I want to go ahead and make some modifications to this, because I didn't have all the freedom that I would have liked to have had while creating, I can go ahead and start with my selection tool. Now this will allow me to make some adjustments. Now if hovering over this line, you'll notice at this point, this really sharp angular point, it turns into a right angle directly underneath the pointer. Now this allows you to change that exact point, and you'll see that this is another point and this is another one. So on these other lines, you'll notice there's a curvature line, because this isn't an actual sort of point on the line itself. So this will allow me to adjust the line and the curvature or Bezier of this line. Now, you can get some really cool, fun shapes out of doing this. And I'll just do something like so. And what you can get and achieve is really limitless. And as long as you just kind of keep playing with it however you like, you get some really neat stuff. Now, the other thing is that you can go ahead and grab the sub-selection tool. Now if you click on this line again, you'll notice you get these white squares. Now these white squares are those actual points that I was showing you where the right angle would go directly underneath the pointer. You can adjust these using that tool. You can adjust these, you see these light blue lines with the blue circle, you can adjust the curvature or the Bezier of it. I'm pressing Ctrl-Z to undo. And that's sort of where your limits reach with the sub-selection tool, but it gives you a few extra options. Then we have our free transform tool. So I'm just going to run a click and drag over the entire thing, and you'll notice I get a bounding box around it with black squares. Now these black squares basically allow you to scale it however you'd like. Free transform tool. So if you want to scale it with the proper constraint the entire time, you can hold shift and use one of the corners. Otherwise you can just scale it horizontally, scale it vertically, really however you like. And this center point here is our anchor point or pivot point. And what that means is if I hover on just the outside of the corner, you'll notice I get this rotational tool located directly underneath the pointer, and then I can go ahead and rotate it, and it'll rotate right around that point. You can also adjust the pivot point. So let's just say I want to change the pivot point to be located right here. And now I go ahead and rotate it. You'll see it rotates from that point, which is pretty cool. So the other things about this particular shape is the pen tool has a whole bunch of sub-selections. So you can add anchor points to this. So I just click, and you'll see I start to add little anchor points. And then let's say I want to get rid of some. I can delete anchor point. Let's say I want to get rid of that one or that one. And you'll see that it starts to change. And then I can go ahead and let's say I want to bring back that shape that I was kind of going for, like so. Something like that. And then I've got convert to anchor point tool. And if you click on here, you'll see that it just slightly adjusted, and that's just by clicking on these little boxes, and you'll see it start to make a little sharper points. Now, I can go ahead and change that again and make this however I like. So those are a couple, the pen tool pretty much has more sub-tools than really any other tool there is, and which is kind of neat, because it has so many different options. But pushing forward onto some of the other tools, and also on the pen tool, in the properties, as I was mentioning in the user face introduction, you can go ahead and change things like the stroke. The stroke is the width of a line, so I'm going to just go to, like, let's say 10. And then the style, here is the style of the line. And you'll notice it's a much thicker line. So I'm going to go ahead and break these down into layers. So this layer, I'm going to go ahead and just double click right here on layer 1, and I'm going to call this pen tool. So this is the pen tool I showed you. I'm going to go lock, this little lock button, now that I can no longer select it or make changes on this layer. I can also hide it. So I'm going to create a new layer. And this one will be the text tool. And with the text tool, I'm going to click here on the text tool, and I'm going to say hello everybody, exclamation point. Now with the text tool, I can go ahead and I can do a whole bunch of different things. I can change the color of it, let's say to blue, and it changes to blue. If I want to go ahead and change the size of the font, I can go ahead and change the size of the font. If I want to change, also the color is located here. I can change it to left justify, or left align, center align, right align, or justification. So I'm going to leave it at center align. And then I can always change the font as well. So let's say this one. And the next thing I'm going to do is show you the first tool we're going to use over here, and that is going to be the align tool. So with this selected, I'm going to select right here, align. I'm going to make sure this align to stage is checked on, and you can align it to the left, and you'll notice it goes right along that edge. Right, it'll do the same thing on that edge. Top, bottom, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to align horizontal center and align vertical center. And these distribute to the top edge. Sort of the same thing, just slightly different. Distribute to right edge, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to center this to the center stage. So that's a really nice way to be able to align your text as well. So you can center align something, then you can center align it to the stage. So that's a pretty nice feature. Now, let's go ahead and touch base on what the line tool is. Now, the line tool, I have the stroke set to 10, and it's going to run off of what is called the stroke color. So you'll notice that it's black, and that's because the line tool runs off of this color here, known as the stroke color. The stroke color is generally on any line that you create will be the stroke color, and any fill-in color of it will be the fill color. So And there's a few exceptions to that, but we'll touch base on that in a moment. Now, with that, with the style, as I was just showing you with the pen tool, it has some of the same options. I can do this dashed line as well. Let's go ahead and change the color to be like red this time. And I'm going to go ahead and just do something like that. Now you can see, if I zoom in here, you'll see those little notches. I'm going to undo it really quickly. Because it's such a thick line, I'm going to go ahead and change it to 5. And you should be able to see that a little bit more clearly. So now you can see that it's actually dashed. And if I were to like bring it down lower, let's say 3, it should be even more clear as far as the dashes go. And then there's a few other extra settings in here which you can mess around with. Now, that being said, I want to go ahead and show you one really awesome thing about Flash, or excuse me, Adobe Animate. One thing about Adobe Animate, and this is the same feature in Adobe Illustrator, is that this is run off of vector art. So those lines that you noticed with the pen tool, and in this case this is the line tool, if I run this down like so, just for fun, and let's say I bring this one up, these lines are created using mathematical equations, which keeps them a hard, crisp line no matter what, even on the letters themselves. So when I zoom in, you'll notice that these stay extremely clear, extremely crisp. And that is a great feature because the scale will always remain the same and you'll never lose that resolution. So that's the best part about vector art. It uses a little bit more memory, so you need to be careful that you're not going too crazy within your scene, but that's a super awesome feature. Now, compared to Photoshop, if you were to zoom in on Photoshop, which is run on pixel art, you're going to notice it gets very blurry. Pixelated is a term you may have heard of before, and I'm going to just go ahead and show you what I mean by that. And this is Photoshop that I just opened, just to show you an example. So I'm going to change the color to black. Okay, so in here, you'll notice it even has a soft outline around it, and if I zoom in, it doesn't keep that hard, crisp line around it. You'll notice it starts to blur out into these little squares, and it becomes very blurry. So that's the difference between pixel art and vector art. Now, even if some of you have messed around with Adobe Photoshop before, you may be saying, oh, the hardness of his brush. Let me go ahead and bring that all the way up. Now, even if I zoom in here, it should be a little bit more crisp, but you're still getting the same effect that I had with the soft brush, where I'm getting this pixelated edging around my art that I created. So that's the major difference between the two. So if we're going back into Adobe Animate, I'll go ahead and show you. No matter what the zoom in it is, it's always going to remain and retain that sharp, crisp line work, and that's due to the vector art and the mathematical equations that happen in the background. So that's the difference between vector art and pixel art. So pushing forward, we covered the line tool, we covered the text tool, we covered the pen tool. And let me go ahead and actually I'm cutting those. And here's another tool you can learn, is paste in place. So I cut them and then I paste it in place on a new layer. So that's a really helpful little hint for you. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my text tool, lock and hide it, and then I'm going to lock and hide my line tool. And I'm going to create a new layer. And let's go ahead and use the pencil tool. Now the pencil tool is similar to the pen tool. And the pencil tool is going to run off the stroke color. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to black. Now the tricky part about the pencil tool, and I'm going to go ahead and dive into it right away and explain to you. And I'm going to change my style. Obviously this style carried over. So I'm going to change it to just a standard solid line at a 3 stroke, which is the width of the line. and then the smoothing's at 50, which is I'm fine with. And then this is another one. I want to make sure you have object drawing off at all times for now, anyway. And then pencil mode, I'm going to just adjust to smooth. And obviously, if I want it to be more smooth, I'll bring it up to 100 or whatever, and I'll start to smooth out a little bit more. But 50 should be fine. Now, here's the trick about the pencil tool that a lot of beginners run into this problem. They start using the pencil tool, and because it's on that vector art, it runs that mathematical equation. So if you think about it like this, think of like the distance equation that you may have learned in math at some point in your life. And the distance equation, I'm going to use my selection tool, and you'll see it on this little right angle here, and this little right angle here, and it created an extra one here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one, and I'm going to delete some of these other ones, and you'll see that's the first problem with the pencil tool, is that it created a whole bunch of lines in there that I didn't want in the first place anyway. So there's that. Now, here's the other thing. I'm going to zoom in, and this is a major sort of bugaboo that people run into. So a lot of people, especially starting out, think this is closed, but it's not. It's actually two separate lines. So this is 1 point and this is 1 point. And they're not, it's not a closed object, even though it looks like it is. So when I go ahead and try to use my paint bucket tool and fill this in, it's not going to work. And the reason being is because it's not closed here. Now if I go ahead and grab my selection tool and I click and drag this line, and it should snap directly on the other one. Now if I fill it in, it should fill in. So just a heads up, that is a major tip to be aware of on how the pencil tool works. And you never want to fill something in with the pencil tool because it's going to use so much memory on your computer because it's calculating all these lines. For anything that you want to fill in, let's just say by hand, you want to use the brush tool because the brush tool doesn't use that same kind of thing. Now, we'll get into the brush tool next. So the pencil tool. The pencil tool still has those same adjustments as far as how you can go ahead and make adjustments to your shape like the pen tool. Right here I got another line I want to get rid of, so you'll notice it's creating a whole bunch of extra lines and stuff that I didn't want to have. But for the most part, it does a pretty good job of creating basic line work. And the nice thing about the pencil tool is that it keeps the same width the entire time, which is a great feature. So now that's kind of what the pencil tool is all about. And the next tool I want to talk about is actually the brush tool. And then we'll talk about this paintbrush tool. So there's two different tools here. There's the brush tool and the paintbrush tool. Now I've got my brush tool. I'm going to lock and hide this one. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this brush. And now the brush tool here runs off of the fill color. Now I was explaining if you want to color something in, you want to use the brush tool because it doesn't use that mathematical equation for line work, so it's not going to have a whole bunch of different little lines. So if you notice when I was clicking on that pencil tool, there was a whole bunch of different extra little lines, and in this case it's not going to run from those individual lines that are created. It just sort of combines them all and sort of mushes them all together, so it saves memory on the computer that you're working on. Now if you have a file with a whole bunch of pencil fill-ins, so if you use the pencil tool to color things in, you're going to run into major lag. So make sure you use the brush tool. And if you just noticed, as long as it popped up in the screen capture, it said not responding, and that's because I'm running a screen capture, but also at the same time I was starting to color things in, and that would have been far worse if I was using the pencil tool. So just keep that in mind while working in your scenes. Other things you can do with the selection tools, you can delete and delete, so you can run selections and just sort of start to delete things, and now I've got pretty much a rectangle. And this was the brush tool. So the brush tool, it has its main settings down here, just like I showed you with the pencil tool. The brush tool has settings down here. You can change the brush size, the brush mode, always keep object drawing off for now, and lock fill, let's keep that off, and then the brush shape. So if I wanted to do something more stylized, I can go ahead and run a different style of brush, and you get some really cool effects that way. And that's pretty much all there is to the brush tool. And use tilt, this is a new one. And it just looks like it keeps sort of the same width around the shapes that you're creating. And let's see. Oh. So the use tilt does not just tilt the canvas or stage, it looks like. I just tried it on my touchpad, on my drawing tablet, and it did not rotate the stage at all. So I thought it might do that, and that's a new feature, but it looks like it just keeps the same width throughout the entire thing, just like it did not do with this because it was the brush type. I changed the style of the brush. So that's the brush tool. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer, and this will be the paintbrush tool. Now the paintbrush tool. The paintbrush tool is a new tool, and what it does is I'm just drawing around, and you're going to see here in just a second, it creates these lines, and sort of like the pencil tool in a way, the paintbrush tool kind of is a mix and match. It's sort of a combination of both the pencil tool and the brush tool, and you'll notice you can do some weird things to the lines, and you'll notice that it's sort of, when it draws these little dotted lines. It draws like the brush tool, but it fills in like it draws like the pencil tool, but it fills in like the brush tool, if that makes any sense. And let's go ahead and see. So that did work, and this one should work too. So it's a little bit less taxing on those lines as far as the pencil tool when it's creating those mathematical equations and whatnot. And let's go ahead and really quickly just show you the brush tool real quick. And let me go ahead and turn off that. So when I go ahead and I hover over this, you notice here I get this right angle and curved line. This one will only have the curved line around it. So this is that paintbrush tool, and this is just the brush tool. Oh no, it does have it. So it does have these points on it as well. So really the main difference so far, as what I can tell, is really just the way it draws. And I see that it draws more like the pencil tool. You can mess around with it and see what you think, but for the most part, it's a combination of, as far as I can tell, of both the pencil tool and brush tool, sort of taking the best of both worlds. So let me go ahead and delete this one. Okay. Okay. And let's do shapes. So when we're going to cover the shape, the rectangle, you'll notice the outline is the stroke color. The fill color will be the color filled in. I've got my oval tool. I'll change this one to red. Obviously, if I don't hold shift, it's not going to keep that perfect circular constraint. If I press shift and hold it, it will create a perfect circle. And then I've got my polystar tool. Now both of these tools are basically the same. The subselection tool is a primitive tool, and it's going to create that little box around it, and for the most part, even if you click on it, it's always going to remain like that square. So when you're just learning, I don't want you to use the primitive version. I would prefer you use just the standard rectangle or oval tool. It gives you a little bit more freedom as far as modification goes. Now, the thing about the polystar tool. Now the polystar tool, it has a by default, it's going to be under polygon. If you go to these tool settings and click options, it has number of sides, star point size, and it's going to be 0.5. So by default, I'm going to change this one, let's see, yellow. Now it's a pentagon. But if I create something like, and I change this from polygon to star, and press OK, and let's change the color again, and turquoise. Now I have a turquoise star. So that's what the poly star is. It changes it. You can change it from a polygonal. So if you did a polygon at 3 sides, it's going to be a triangle. So you got to kind of think in terms of polygonal shapes. And then if you wanted it to be like a 20-side star, it can do that too by going here, options, say 20, and star, click OK, and let's say like a purple. And now I've got a 20-side star. So you can get some really, really cool shapes out of that tool. And that's really all the content tools that we have here. Now, in here, we're not going to talk about the bone tool today. We've already covered the fill tool, but just to cover it one more time, I'm going to go ahead and click here on this circle, press delete. Using my paint bucket tool, I'll click that, and then I'll select like a green color, and now I click and it creates a green in there. So that's the paint bucket tool. The one thing I told you about the paint bucket tool, if it's not working, it's because either A, the shape isn't closed, or B, you can try to mess around with some of these extra settings, such as don't close small gaps, close medium gaps, close large gaps. And let's just pretend that I'm going to delete the center of this. I'm going to use my eraser tool, so I just click on my eraser tool, and you'll notice there's a gap there. And let's see if I can go ahead and, using close large gaps, will this close this shape? So it did. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I'm going to undo that and see if I go to close medium gaps if it'll close it. So it will not work only on large gaps. So depending on the size of the gap, you may need to adjust the size of your setting down here. Few other things we have is the eyedropper tool. This will select the color. So let's say I want this turquoise. You'll notice the turquoise just changed here. I'll do that one more time. I'll select this yellow. It'll change to yellow. The width tool. Now if I click on this width tool and I go ahead and I start to drag things out, you'll notice the width of this line becomes much thicker. Let's do it to this one, and you'll see it happens again. So you can get some, let's go ahead and do it to this one. I'm just trying to make it thinner actually. See what happens. Made it thicker. Whoops. And now it's sort of, so you see what it does. Let's try it one more time on here. And it will change the thickness of your lines. It looks like it depends on which point you select on. This is a new feature to Adobe Animate or Adobe Flash if you've ever used the previous version. And it will adjust the thickness of your lines, which is a really cool feature. And that's almost all the tools we have here. So again, the eraser tool, go ahead and erases. And I'll go ahead and undo that really quickly. Now if I go ahead and eraser mode, you can change erase fills, erase lines, and so on and so forth. Faucet should just erase whatever you select, which it does. And then you can also have this eraser size. So I can go ahead and erase things like so. Whether I want it to be circular, like let's say here, or here, or here. I can also have it erase in a square shape, like so. So those are some of these other tools, and I call these tools I call the selection tools. So I haven't really I covered the free transform tool, but I haven't covered this lasso tool. The lasso tool just goes ahead, I'm going to go ahead and round and select, and you'll notice it selects that region, and I can go ahead and delete it. If I want to go ahead and select another region again, and let's say I just want to change all the colors to the same color, it'll change all to the same color. Like that. I'm going to delete that one. So these are our selection tools. These are our content creation tools. And these I call the modification tools. So these modify your content that you created. Down here we have the navigate tools, if you will. So this is the hand tool. It allows you to navigate around. This is your zoom tool, so you can zoom in or zoom out. You can select like a region you want to zoom out to or zoom into. Again, the zoom is also up here. And then the keyboard shortcut while you're working on a scene is spacebar. And that covers all the tools. So we got the stroke color, the fill color. These are your color selectors. And then your settings or properties of each individual tool that you select up here. So that pretty much covers every tool in there that we're going to be covering for a while now. I hope you enjoyed the tools section. It went into very extreme detail of what each tool does and how it works. And I hope you're able to take these tools and use them to create some really awesome content in the future. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave me comments below. And I hope you enjoyed watching the tools section of a 2D animation Adobe Animate.